I'm not going to bury the lead on this one. This is the best shot of The Dark Knight. It's the opening shot right after the credits run. The reason this shot is the best shot is because this shot is a thesis statement. So, what does it say? Script readers in Hollywood like to say they can tell if a script is good right after the first page. And it's not like a script has to start with an epic monologue for them to know it's good. They can check if it's formatted correctly, yes, but more importantly, they check if it has begun to build something. If they can sense that something is being built, even on page 1, that's a script that at the very least needs to be continued to be read at that point. You'd be surprised, because we don't really remember movies this way, but you can kind of do that with movies too. You can judge them by their first shot. It used to be a movie starting with a helicopter shot meant that this was a big budget production, so you should keep watching, see what they get up to with all that money. Now we have drones, and they have kind of ruined that. No longer can we trust movies with floating, flying, opening shots to be big budget affairs. But whether this shot is a helicopter or a drone is beside the point. For one thing, can you feel that the camera is playing chicken with the building? We know this shot has something to say, besides just floating around the city and signaling this is a big budget opening. But what's it trying to say? Call me Ishmael, the first famous line of Moby Dick, one of the most famous first lines in any novel, could also be considered a thesis statement. Great media has great beginnings. Having your opening also be a thesis statement isn't at first glance super valuable. The audience won't perceive it until maybe later, but maybe never. They can only perceive and feel the building nature. So like with scripts, you have to start building right from the beginning. Call Me Ishmael and this shot from Dark Knight do that. But the fact they are thesis statements mean they inform creative decisions down the line as well. In the case of this shot, to get the full picture of how great it is and how ripe and rich its thesis statement is, we have to look at the previous movie, Batman Begins. Batman Begins, although it has its superfans, I think, does it even? It is at least generally agreed that it's the worst of the Dark Knight trilogy, right? Anyways, that's what I think. It had some things going for it. It kind of invented this new, crazy, fast, kind of weird expositional pace that Nolan has since used in a ton of his iconic blockbusters. That might have come partly from the collaboration with David Goyer, at least at first. It was different than the previous Batman movies, a little more realistic, you could say, but not that different, not that realistic. It was still Batman and still a continuation, even though it didn't want to be. And as just a little aside, let me point out, he still couldn't move his neck. The suit had no neck joint, so he was still walking around like a crash victim with a neck brace. But the main thing I want you to notice is Gotham. Gotham was still gothic. It was every bit as gothic and fantastical as the Tim Burton version, to the point of being cartoony, like Tim Burton's version. One problem is, to achieve this, they had to shoot on green screens, use CGI, even miniatures, which are super cool, but it looks kind of fake, and undermines what Nolan was going for in the first place. Cut to the opening shot of Dark Knight. Notice anything different? Where's the gothic architecture? Where's the green screen, the CGI, the miniatures? Batman had finally been moved to the real world. On top of that, this shot is IMAX, and that's as real as it gets. Light interacting with emulsion on film creates the images. It's about capturing reality, capturing light. But IMAX is called large format. They are capturing even more light, more realism than you might even think at first glance. It hits you right in the face. You can feel it. Now, looking at this finished shot, it's easy to be like, yeah, makes sense, cool. But you don't know how crazy the decisions they had to make to get to this point were. For one, if they demand realism, there are ways to get that and keep the gothic feel. They could have shot the movie in London. Why did they choose Chicago and ditch the gothic architecture completely? The thesis statement thickens. Here's what I can do. You know how I said a good thesis statement can inform creative decisions down the line? I'll go over 3 amazing decisions, well, 2 amazing and 1 kind of stupid, that spawned downstream from this idea, the idea of this shot. Number 1, many say Nolan ripped off Michael Mann's Heat for The Dark Knight. And don't get me wrong, nobody's complaining, it's amazing, but the influence is obvious. I think even Nolan has acknowledged it. And while Heat is shot in LA and Dark Knight is shot in Chicago, the modern architecture, realism, even the music is all the same. The feel is the same. What's great is that it works. and it's one of the best ideas in the movie to go this direction. But how they got there is from the thesis statement of that first shot. 2. Many have praised Heath Ledger's iconic performance as Joker, and it's true, it's so good. But they wrote him a great part with lots to do. He has almost as much screen time as Batman. Again, this is similar to Heat and how Heat does it. In a good movie, anytime you give a character a lot to do in a story, the audience will kind of like them even if they're the bad guy. And a big part of the theme of Dark Knight is the balancing act between Joker and Batman. How they are two sides of the same coin. You could even say yin and yang. One side is fascist, the other side is anarchist. One is the algorithm, the other is chaos. Joker even says, this is when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object, something like that. This dichotomy spawns from the shift to modern architecture, so boxy, nothing but right angles, almost brutalist, almost a new modern kind of fascism. This conflict is where the sprawl of civilization has led us, to a moment of truth. 3. Lastly, they made it so Batman can finally move his neck. Yippee! Mobile neck! Woo! Yeah! What's funny is they made a whole plot point of it. Like Batman is like, Alfred, turns out I have to be able to look around. I keep getting punched in the side of my head, and I didn't see it coming. Okay, so he's been severely handicapped in battle, all the way up until this point, I guess. Just change it and say nothing. Hope nobody notices, like with the architecture. It's not really a continuity error, it's a whole ethos, a whole thesis statement, and a welcome one. What's interesting is this shot, this idea, can't really be communicated through the script. It has to come up in the creative process, presumably very early in pre-production in the design stage. Or maybe Nolan knew this is what he wanted to do as soon as Batman Begins wrapped and he realized he had made a mistake. The lesson being that inspiration, motifs, themes, thesis statements can come from the design process. And these are more important than the writing. But you could actually consider them pieces of writing in a way, so it's a bit of a contradiction. And every decision will affect the decisions around it. The cohesion is part of the inspiration. It takes a vast knowledge of the Batman universe and lore, what's come before, what could be, to get to this point and make this decision. Let's ditch the gothic stuff and see what happens. If you like this essay on storytelling interactivity, be sure to check out the other essays on my channel, including one about the best line in The Matrix, or you can buy the whole book I wrote on it here, link in description. Thanks.